Run DNA has an incredible range of running and walking footwear, apparel and accessories, catering for anyone who is looking for the right shoe and fit. They're trusted by podiatrists and physiotherapists right across Adelaide. The Run DNA fitters advice is second to none. So if it's time for new walkers or runners, you can find Run DNA, 20 Manton Street, Hindmarsh, or the other location, 391 Fullerton Road at Fullerton. Both stores open 7 days a week, plenty of off-street parking. You can find them online as well, rundna.com.au. If you run or walk, then you need to run DNA.
It's the 13th of June. Welcome to Hooked on Sport. Lots happening. Getting cold in Adelaide, but we've been looking overseas to the World Test Cricket Championship at Lords. Hooky, what are you seeing?
I tell you what I need to see, Wallace, is 3 televisions at the moment because I'm trying to watch the cricket, the footy and the US Open golf all at once. Thank goodness the French Open finished last week. Otherwise, I'd need a 4th television. Absolute sporting joy for me at the moment with so much to take in. The cricket has been quite incredible, hasn't it? 28 wickets have fallen in the first 2 days. You would probably say that is inappropriate for a World Test Championship final, but at the same time, it's been somewhat reflective of the way we've seen cricket played in this last year block that represents what this World Test Championship final stands for. So, a bit disappointing that it's all going to be over by the end of the night tonight, but at the same time, it's been played at a frenetic pace. It's been fascinating cricket. Australia, which we thought would probably dominate South Africa, certainly have not done so, and we've got a game that's going to go right down to the wire.
Yeah, I think you said, what did you say, 28 wickets and just under about 494 runs in 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, historically that is unheard of. I mean, you go back a decade ago in cricket and it was 500 versus 500 versus 350 and see if you could chase those down on day 5. But no, I mean, this is a 6-day test and you could fit 2 matches in with the way we're going at the moment, couldn't you?
Sure could. So, Hooky, what's your prediction?
Oh, look, I think Australia win from here. Already South Africa are going to have to chase down what will be the highest score in the match. It doesn't seem like batting is going to get any easier. For all of the issues that I think surround Australia's top 3, South Africa's top 3 might even struggle even more. And I just reckon the professionalism and the relentlessness of the Australian attack will see them be able to bowl out South Africa for whatever it is that they have to defend. And I think they'll probably do it pretty comfortably. South Africa, look, if they got to 150, if the conditions prevail, that would be pretty incredible. The only caveat I place on that, Wallace, is if we turn up at Lords today and it's a really warm, sunny day and the wicket does just bake out a little bit. That's probably the only thing that gets South Africa over the line. But I think if conditions remain pretty similar to what they have done for the first 2 days, then Australia will go on and win.
Now, Hooky, what's going on in the footy at the moment?
Crows have got a great litmus test tonight. They take on Hawthorn and they take them on at Launceston. And you might argue it's the toughest road trip in Australian football right now. Hawthorn are virtually unbeaten there. Adelaide has a decent record. They've been pretty close a couple of times. But this is going to be in the spotlight. These have often been sort of early Saturday or early Sunday games. So in the bright lights of Friday night football and what will be pretty cold weather, you would think, at Launceston this evening, I think Adelaide have already underlined their credentials as a serious finals team. But this would be quite out of the box if they could win from here. Hawthorn looked to be back in form after their strong victory over the Western Bulldogs last week. That form got franked last night by the Western Bulldogs' comfortable victory over St Kilda. So I just feel like this is an almighty test for Adelaide. You certainly wouldn't put a line through them if they don't win it, but they go further up in a lot of people's expectations if they can win it from here. So I feel like perhaps the Victorian mindset around the Adelaide Crows will take a huge jump if they can beat Hawthorn tonight.
Okay, Hooky, let's move on to fair or farce. For all their gains as a team, Australia's top 3 is in a mess. Fair or farce?
Fair, Wallace. And I think it's of their own making as well, the Australian cricket team. We're picking routinely openers who have never opened in the past. Let's just think about the last 12 months. in India, 2 years, I suppose, but Travis Head was cobbled into a makeshift opener in India, and then he was used again in Sri Lanka. I kind of understand why they did it in Sri Lanka, because they wanted someone who could force the pace early. But outside of that, you think about this. Nathan McSweeney was a number 3, number 4 originally for Queensland and then for South Australia, and was forced up to become an opener for the last series against India. And Marnus Labuschagne, we've done exactly the same thing here. And then Cameron Green, who was never seriously batted 3, became Australia's number 3, and he did it on the strength of playing Division 2 county cricket and making hundreds where he was batting at number 5. So it's a piecemeal top 3, sort of cobbled together, if you like. And I think when you put those guys in at the top, it has an adverse effect on your next 3. And these 3 guys are your bankers: Steve Smith, Travis Head, Beau Webster. Travis Head, who has come in, he's been really, you could probably argue, the most important player for Australia in the last couple of years. He's come in at 3 for 46 after 17.6 overs in the second innings, and 3 for 44 after 17.5 overs in the first innings. And you Webster on top of that, he's been coming in at number 6 before the score is 50 and the ball isn't even 20 overs old. So I have a bit of a theory here. Alex Carey's batting is severely underrated and probably underutilised at number 7. He's come in and played some really important roles at number 7. If you go back to Sri Lanka, he was maybe the best batter in the Australian team. I know Usman Khawaja made that wonderful double century, but what Alex Carey did in the middle of the order there was so important. I would have a bit of a theory here, Wallace. There's 2 parts to this. One is start picking opening batters to open the batting, and guys who've had plenty of experience at number 3 to bat at number 3. I mean, we have been sold this concept that the best 6 batters can bat anywhere, and that has been proven demonstrably wrong. And that can't be the policy heading into the Ashes. So that's the first thing that George Bailey, as the chairman of selectors, has to work out, is finding guys who can do the job at the top of the order and not just piecemealing a top order together. Then I think the other thing that they should start to be thinking about is a more fluid batting order. Quite frankly, if we haven't had 20 overs bowled in an innings and we've lost 3 wickets, it shouldn't be Travis Head walking out to bat, nor should it be Beau Webster. Alex Carey, who is a guy who does have experience batting at the top of the order, more so in white ball cricket than red ball cricket, but he is eminently capable of dealing with those conditions, probably more so than Head and Webster, and you want them at the crease when conditions are favourable to batting. So there's a couple of things to think about there. Get some top order, some specialist top order players in at the top of the order, and you need to do it. You need to work it out in the West Indies, because you're going to have to get it right in the Ashes, and then start to think about where Alex Carey bats. If conditions are difficult for batting, it should be higher than where it is.
The other name, obviously, is Sam Constas. What do you think in regards to him being an opener? Do you think they're just going to try him in the next series?
I think this should be the last time that Marnus Labuschagne plays a test match as the opening batsman, and that the first ball bowled, which Australia faces against the West Indies, Sam Constas must be at the crease. That is just an absolute given now. Marnus has done okay, but he has never in his last 2.5 years as a test cricketer looked the player he was, or that he was going to be able to dominate a match. Those days are beyond him, and I think Australia needs to start to look ahead. We need to think about, I guess, easing Usman Khawaja out of this team as well. If he turns up for the Ashes and Mark Wood and Jofra Archer are part of the attack, I just don't see how he was going to survive that. Express pace bowling has found him out for a while now, in particular in marginal conditions, and it's almost certainly what we'll get again in Australia. So I have no faith that Usman Khawaja is going to be able to do the job for Australia at the top of the order in the upcoming Ashes. So, yeah, they have some serious questions to answer, and they've really only got 2 more tests to do it, and they're both going to be on pretty dead, slow, low wickets in the West Indies.
For all their gains as a club, the Adelaide Crows still lack a hard edge. Fair or farce?
Wallace, I think this is fair as well. They just seem like a club that is playing very, very well, but all at the same time, they just seem desperate to be nice. I just want to take you through a couple of examples of the last year or so. Wayne Miller, in a conversation with a journalist, referred to the Sydney Swans as being a bit like something of a rabble. I've paraphrased that a little bit, but it wasn't like he was being uber critical, but he did just say with the way they were getting stuck into each other out there, they'd become what he thought was a bit of a rabble. Now, they felt the need to apologise to the Sydney Swans for that. The only people who weren't offended by it were the Sydney Swans themselves, who entirely agreed with the assessment. I was really interested with the way that the Tex Walker, Wanganeen Malira story developed this week out of the news report from Caroline Wilson that Wanganeen Malira wouldn't be going to the Adelaide Crows because he didn't want to play with Taylor Walker. We got barely a whimper about that from the Adelaide Crows. I would have been absolutely livid and seething, and I would have been, if I was Matthew Nix or if I was Tim Silvers or I was John Olsen, I would have been straight to every media agency that I could have possibly find and eviscerated Caroline Wilson for that opinion that was largely debunked, wasn't it? She's the only one who's standing by it. And Wanganeen Miller himself felt the need to contact Taylor Walker and say it's not true. His manager said it wasn't true. And I was just stunned that the Crows didn't get on the front foot about that and defend their player and take on the journalist. I go back to last year when Josh Rochelle was pointing at the Port Adelaide fans about the lack of teeth and all of that joke. He was dropped the next week. And then I even go back to the Tyson Stengel and that ongoing illicit drugs issue. The club sacked him, didn't even use him as a trade. It almost wanted to say, we are zero tolerance to all of these sorts of things. I reckon there comes a time when you've got to support your player. You've got to stick up for your people and you've got to show a little bit of baring your teeth, showing claws from a Crows perspective. And I reflect on the way Geelong has handled Bailey Smith this week. So he used the term nose beers, which I think we all understand the connotations of what that's referring to. And they were very, very supportive of him. They stood by him and they didn't allow the media to drive the narrative that this was unreasonable or unfair or poorly behaved. I just wonder what Adelaide would have done in the same circumstance. I mean, if you take the Josh Rochelle line or even the Tyson Stengel line, I would argue that maybe we would have seen Bailey Smith drop for a week if he was an Adelaide player. I'd love to see Adelaide develop a bit of a hard edge and just say, we don't care what anyone else thinks about us. We are going to start to play tough, hard football, both on and off the field. And I think they're playing excellent football on the field at the moment. Love to see them get a bit tougher off the field. Just become a nightmare for other clubs rather than, a friendly organisation that everyone seems to find fairly jovial and easy to get along with.
When you consider the champions not in, Aaron Phillips didn't deserve entry into the Australian Football Hall of Fame. Fair or farce?
Farce, Wallace, but with a caveat. She absolutely 100% belongs in the Australian Football Hall of Fame. That was always the destiny for her, following what she did for the women's game from its infancy up to the moment that she retired. And I'm sure she'll make some significant contributions along the way as well. But I do not understand why we needed to induct Erin Phillips just 18 or so months after her retirement from the game. I just want to compare it with Nick Riewoldt and Gary Lyon, who still have a lot of currency in Australian rules football. Nick Riewoldt was retired for 8 years before he was inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame. Gary Lyon for 26 years before he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And 18 months for Erin Phillips, I think, is just a little bit too soon. We just need to allow these careers to settle and give ourselves more opportunity to reflect on them before these sorts of accolades are bestowed on people. And it just suggested to me that there was this path to sort of push to fast track an historical narrative on the women's game that I just don't think was necessary. And I also think it's this is probably maybe a bit too hard and a bit too controversial, but I reckon there are officials in the AFL who wanted to be responsible for making this decision and weren't prepared to just allow that to happen organically, and maybe that was for someone down the track. It's almost a little bit selfish. I want to be the person who made this decision to put Erin Phillips and Daisy Pearce into the Australian Football Hall of Fame. They 100% belong, but I reckon authenticity in these sorts of things is really important. And this just struck me as something that was contrived and unnecessary. Erin Phillips was always destined to be in the Hall of Fame. It didn't need to happen this quickly.
The Adelaide Thunderbirds season was finished the moment Shamira Sterling Humphrey announced her pregnancy. Fair or farce?
This is another one that I think is fair, Wallace. We had to accept that the influence that Shamira Sterling-Humphrey has on quieting the great goal shooters of this competition and having her out of the team has had a significant negative effect on the performance of the Adelaide Thunderbirds. And I think it's had an effect all over the court. We are seeing unprecedented levels of disparity between what the goal shooters and the goal attack are doing in the last 5 minutes of each quarter for the opposing team compared to what is happening for the Adelaide team. So for those who are not understanding quite what I'm talking about, they have this bonus period of 5 minutes at the end of every quarter, the last 5 minutes of end of every quarter. And if you shoot from the outside half of the D, every goal is worth 2 goals. And Adelaide's never been great at it, but they've always been able to compensate for it by the fact that their defence is so strong and they managed to win ball through the mid-court that they're having so many more shots than their opposition, it's never really mattered. But now we're seeing that we don't quite have that capacity to create the intercept in the back half of the court without Shamira Sterling-Humphrey. And as a result, there is more pressure on our goal shooter and our goal attack to hit these double goals, if you like, in the last 5 minutes of every quarter. And they are failing miserably. In the last game against the Giants, one of the bottom teams, a home game as well, I think it was 11 out of 12 attempts were successful by the Giants, 2 out of 16 for the Adelaide Thunderbirds. So that is just really hurting them as an organisation. And this is not just strictly speaking a defensive problem. This has become a problem all over the court with the fact that everyone else is dealing with the pressure of having to step up and cover for the fact that Shamira Sterling-Humphrey isn't there. They're gone. Their season is over. It's a great shame because they were a big chance of a three-peat, the first team in the history of Super Netball to do so. But, they're just going to have to regroup and hopefully Sterling-Humphrey can become a mum and become a really important player of the Adelaide Thunderbirds in 2026 because, my word, they need her.
The SANFL needs a mechanism to aid lowly ranked clubs. Fair or farce?
And yet another fair, Wallace. This is something that I've been on about for a long time. If you look at the AFL, there is a draft to try and equalise the competition. If you go to the Amateur Football League, the Adelaide Footy League, there is a relegation and promotion system so that you are routinely put into a level of football where you are playing against clubs that are of a similar standard. Now, you get blowouts in every season in the Adelaide Footy League, but that's kind of the idea of the system, to keep evening it up and make sure that you are put in the right level of competition. In the country leagues where you don't have promotion and relegation, but the smaller clubs or the struggling clubs get extra points in a points allocation system that allows you to recruit bigger and better players, more players, bigger name players, which aren't afforded some of the stronger clubs in the same competition. And that's the way they try and equalise. There's no such mechanism in the SANFL, and we are seeing constantly this challenge where South Adelaide and West Adelaide, 2 of the lowly clubs, they're historic clubs in the SANFL, but at the same time, they are lowly, they have small supporter bases, and they've been starved of success, and they have a lot of trouble competing with the bigger clubs like Sturt, Norwood and Glenelg in particular. And those are the 3 clubs that, Norwood are a bit down this year, but have dominated the competition in the last 5 or 6 years. So I'm of the opinion that the SANFL needs to start to work out how they can generate some success for the clubs that I'm referring to, in particular South Adelaide and West Adelaide. And our mate Sam Elliott has taken over as senior coach of the West Adelaide Football Club, and that is going to be an awfully difficult job. He went down to Port Adelaide last weekend and they lost by 10 goals, and I don't see a great future. But I think what has manifested itself here is that this constant challenge with regard to finances. They've got no fans. They've got very little revenue. And we end up with a situation where Adam Hartlett, the previous coach of the West Adelaide Football Club, has to take an extended period of mental health leave because he's just so stressed by it all. And I think it's unfortunate. So, yeah, I do understand these clubs are bereft of money as well, but they need to work out a way whether they can increase their salary cap or allow them to bring in a marquee player outside the salary cap. South Adelaide and West Adelaide in particular need some support. Otherwise, these clubs will just go on withering on the vine, Wallace, and I just reckon it's really unreasonable. We need a vibrant 10-team competition, particularly when 2 of the teams are AFL associated. And It's an awkward fit as it is. So to have, two teams that are kind of unusual from being AFL and other two teams that are non-competitive, it's a 16 competition, and that's not right. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd encourage you to take a listen to Beyond the Club. It's a project I've been working on with Flinders University. Now I co-host it with Professor Sam Elliott, and we break down all the latest research on how to maximise the experience of junior and club athletes. There's a range of resources, special guests, and cutting-edge info on how you can make your club a safer, happier place for your kids and their club mates. Beyond the Club, wherever you get your podcasts. Wallace, I want to put you in this scenario. You are the CEO, and I want to ask you how you would have dealt with Stephen May and the on-field argument that he had with Max Gawn in the closing seconds and after the final siren of the Queen's Birthday match between Collingwood and Melbourne last weekend. Melbourne lost by a point. Max Gawn had played a wonderful game and then made a mistake in the last few seconds, and Stephen May was extraordinarily critical in public. It's something that Stephen May has been, I guess, renowned for in his time as a footballer, that he is often prepared to take on his teammates, whether that's on-field or off-field. Interested in your thoughts on it and how you would have dealt with it if you were the CEO of the Melbourne Football Club.
It's never a good look to see teammates having a crack at each other on the field, no matter what sport it is. Teammates don't like it. Coaches don't like it. Supporters don't like it. Nobody likes it. It just sends the wrong message that this team doesn't respect each other. And even if you look at footy more recently, there was a Collingwood lad, young lad, I think, might have been playing his first game, ended up missing, had an opportunity to kick a goal, missed, and all the Collingwood boys were around him. Absolutely fantastic.
I think I know what you're talking about. It was Jack Crisp. It wasn't his first game. It was breaking the record for the most consecutive games. And this was the narrative, that he was going to kick this match-winning goal after the siren on the game that he broke the record, beating Jim Steins for the most consecutive games of football. But your point's well made. You're exactly right, Wallace. And it's well done observing it. All of the players, the Collingwood players, got around and showed support and love for him, rather than that criticism of, well, you've made a mistake, and I want to really highlight it.
And I think from the role of a CEO or a GM, they've got to tread very carefully on these sort of situations, because you've got a coaching group who's overseeing, you've got a head coach, you've got a whole team working together, and it's really, when you butt in, you've got to make sure that you butt in at a point in time when it's really important. And that to me, from the administration side of things, is something you might just bring up with your weekly or fortnightly coffee, with the coach or the coaching group, as I'm sure they'd have some sort of contact throughout the season. And then you just sort of, have a chat about that, because I would certainly think that it will be something that the head coach should be actually managing and overseeing. It is not a great look, and I don't think anybody wants it. So they've got to make the call in regards to how they're going to deal with it. And only if it doesn't get resolved would a CEO or a GM or anybody in admin even have the right to go and chat to the coach in detail about what they think should be done.
Yeah, good. Really well explained, Wallace. I've got to be honest with you. I feel like Stephen May has run out of opportunities and mistakes. I would be very hardline with Stephen May. He's not such an important player anymore. He's still a good footballer, but he's 31, 32, heading towards the end of his career. He might only have a couple of years left. And I just wonder if he is at least as disruptive as he is helpful toward the club's overall cause. And I would be starting to think about, do I want this person at my club mid to long term? Do we need him for the next 2 years, or can we start to think about maybe trading him out for someone who really thinks that key defensive role is a deficiency of theirs? I don't think it's quite so much for Melbourne. They've got a great group of 18 to 22-year-olds, and I just reckon May's influence is such that I might prefer to see him outside that group than in it.
Yeah, that's a good point you raised about the history. If there's a long history of the individual, and they're getting to the point where maybe they're not going to be on the bus anymore. And if they're not going to be on the bus, then that's a totally different conversation that's got to be had. And as you've identified, a sense of how do you exit the person, and that's professional sport as opposed to a local community sport.
100%. Yeah, it's a very, very different discussion when you've got a local sport, don't you? And we've spoken to Sam Elliott about that on Beyond the Club. And, he's very, very explicit about working with people in those scenarios rather than just moving them onto the outside. But certainly from an AFL perspective, I would be of the opinion that Stephen May and the Melbourne Football Club could do with parting company. Can I just wrap it up with my weekly
Power rankings?
Power rankings?
Let's do it.
Yeah. And we missed last week, didn't we? I was just that busy, Wallace. We just never found a window to fit. So these have jumped around a little bit. Brighton lacrosse men. Can you
just remind the listeners, Hooky, about your power rankings and what's the basis of it?
Power rankings is basically a fluid premiership ladder for all South Australian sporting teams in either a national or a local state league competition. So you can't be playing country footy. You can't be playing fifth grade netball. It's either a state or Premier League competition or you're part of a national league. And you obviously get a few credit points if you're a national league team and you're doing well. But these are what I think for this week is the top 10 sporting clubs we have got in South Australia. And obviously they change every week. So, and as I told you, we missed last week. So this is after a fortnight, and there has been some significant change because I am brutal in my assessment of the power rankings.
Okay, let's go.
Brighton lacrosse men's team last week, so when I say last week, the week before, they had their first loss. They were sitting third or fourth on the power rankings. They're out altogether, Wallace. They've dropped down to 11th, and in 10th position, I've put the Brighton lacrosse women who are undefeated. I always mark them hardly because they've won the last 7 premierships, but they're back in at number 10. At number 9, I've got the Oakdale Netball Club, who are top of the Premier League netball competition here in South Australia. They'll play the lowly Newton Jaguars tonight. I'm certain that they will hold at least a 1-game lead on the premiership table before they run into the second place contacts next week. Seacliff Hockey are at number 8. They remain undefeated with 8 wins and a draw, alongside the 7th-ranked team, the Adelaide Hockey Club, who are also undefeated with 8 wins and a draw. So they are ones to watch to move their way up. New team, Wallace, at position number 6. It is the Central District Lions men's team. Do you remember last year we talked about the women's team that went from bottom? They won 3 wooden spoons in a row and then won the premiership last year. Well, the men's team is following in their footsteps because they have jumped up to be 9-1. It's a really interesting story. They're coached by Rupert and his sons Kalani and Kayon both play in this team. They're led by Efemina Abigidi, a Nigerian-born superstar who's dominating the scoring for them. So Central District Lions with a big bounce up into spot number 6, the men's team. I've got West Adelaide Soccer Club, the women's team, who are 8 points clear in top position on the WNPL women's competition. Metro Stars for the men, they're also 8 points clear, so they're in 4th position. Stirling SANFL, 9 and zip. I've got them in at 3rd. I've thrown in the SA women's lacrosse team in at 2nd position, who won the national title this week. And I tell you what I reckon we should do at some point, Wallace, is organise a chat with Trish Adams. She's a former Australian coach. She's the Brighton coach who has led them to those 7 straight titles. And now she's led South Australia to the national title as well, beating Victoria in Victoria, which was a huge achievement. And then at number 1, with a big game tonight, the Adelaide Crows are number 1 in the power rankings, and they'll take on Hawthorn at Launceston tonight. What a massive clash that is.
Brilliant, Hooky. Now, what's on, other than watching the Crows tonight, what do you got on this weekend, sport-related?
Oh, well, look, I think the US Open is going to be a fascinating watch. Oakmont, which is renowned as being one of the toughest courses in America and set up extra tough for a US Open, played a bit softer than we thought this week. I think there's 17 people under par. There was a bit of an expectation that we might see an over par score win the tournament. The way it's on its trajectory at the moment, we probably won't see that, but who knows? If it stays dry over the next 3 days, we could see some absolute carnage for the US Open, but that's always going to be a fascinating watch. Adam Scott in and around the market at even par. Gee, Cameron Smith, we've talked before about live golf and how it's been great for some people and terrible for some others. It's been great for Bryson DeChambeau. It's been great for Joaquin Neiman, but it has been a disaster for Cameron Smith, who shot 5 over today. I think he's in a tie for about 95th. and you don't expect that he's going to make the cut from there. So, yeah, it's just a shame. You remember where he was in the Australian sporting hierarchy when he won the Open Championship at St Andrews.
Yep.
And what a fall from grace that has been. So I think the US Open is going to be absolutely fascinating, and then we'll see what happens with the cricket tonight as well. There's a lot of really serious sport going on at the moment. The US Open, it's a big boys tournament, and the World Test Championship final doesn't get any bigger than that. And of course, all the AFL going on around us. There's a couple of buys on at the moment. But there's some massive games as well. So plenty to take in.
My word, there is. I must say, I did make one observation at the World Test Championship at Lords that the long room is a little bit less spectators or members in the long room as the lads were walking through this time.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. One little final observation before we wrap it up. I said to you in early April that Thursday night football in Melbourne was on watch, and I gave you the list of a number of crowd sizes that had diminished when the matchup between those two teams had gone to Thursday night. I just want to make the point. Yep. There was 20,500 people for two Victorian teams at an indoor stadium on Thursday night in Melbourne. That is diabolically bad. 20,500 for St Kilda and the Western Bulldogs. St Kilda home game. They don't attract crowds. But what is going on with Thursday night football in Victoria? I get really frustrated with this. I feel like the interstate teams made Thursday night football popular. And of course, inevitably, the AFL and their Victorian buyers start to hand those games to Victorian clubs who are just chewing it up and spitting it out. We've got to do something about that. I just reckon Thursday night football needs to either go to emerging markets or it needs to be a slot where struggling Victorian teams are selling their game to a market that doesn't normally see Australian rules football. But these games between two bang average teams at Marvel Stadium, the TV ratings might be okay, but the crowd numbers are diabolical and we've got to do something different.
On that note, have a great weekend, Hooky. We'll catch up next week.
Right on, mate.
That's a wrap on another episode of Hooked on Sport. A quick reminder to follow us and leave a review if you enjoy what you hear. Your support helps Hooked on Sport reach even more sports-minded people just like you. We look forward to your company next week on Hooked on Sport.